In 1971, General Idi Amin overthrew the elected government of Milton Obote and declared himself President of Uganda, launching a ruthless 8-year regime in which an estimated 300,000 civilians were massacred. His expulsion of all Indian and Pakistani citizens in 1972 along with increasing military expenditures brought about the country's economic decline, the impact of which lasted decades. In 1979 his reign of terror came to an end as Ugandan exiles and Tanzanians took control of the capital of Kampala, forcing Amin to flee. Never brought to justice for his heinous crimes, Amin lived out the remainder of his life in Saudi Arabia. Field Marshal Idi Amin Dada was the third president on independent Uganda, after Frederick Mutesa II and Milton Obote. Amin, a bulkhead figure standing at more than 6 feet, was no easy president. He shook the world in different ways through his antics and was at one time one of the most feared dictators in the world. There are different accounts about his place of birth. In some accounts, he claimed to have been born at the place where the International Conference Center stands today. Others say he was born in Koboko to a Kakwe father and a Lugbara mother. His actual year of birth is not clear too. It is said that he was born between 1925 and 1928. Amin's childhood was a total wreck because he was abandoned by his mother when he was still a baby. He, however, survived the streetwise way, selling snacks and doing casual work to earn a living. In 1946, Amin, who had hobnobbed with soldiers in his early life, courtesy of his mother's marriage to a King's African Rifle clerk, joined the King's African Rifles. It is not clear whether he joined directly as a soldier, however some sources claim that he was first recruited as a kitchen cook. But soon, he became a real soldier. It was while with the car that the word Dada was added to his name because he kept mentioning it whenever he greeted a lady. In between soldiering, he enjoyed different sports activities, including boxing in which he rose to the level of a national heavyweight champion. He tried out athletics as a sprinter and played rugby. He was all the time jolly. He was a distinguished soldier, easy to pick out from the crowd, largely owing to his actions. During an attack against the Mau Mau in Kenya, he fought bravely in places like Kanyama and Kangema in which he killed several of them. He was promoted to the rank of sergeant in 1955 and he became a commissioned officer in 1961. He was deployed as commander of a unit in Karamoja that was supposed to stop cattle rustling in the area. By the time Uganda got her independence, Idi Amin was one of the leading soldiers who formed the first Uganda Independence Army. By 1964 he had been named Deputy Army Commander while Shaban Palat was the Army Commander. Milton Obote then deployed him to help the Katanga rebels who were fighting against Zaire government. Later, it emerged that Amin had indeed sold gold and diamonds given to him by the rebels in return for arms. Much later, the issue went before Parliament for debate, however Obote snuffed it in the bud by arresting all the ringleaders, hence saving himself and Amin. Having struck a wonderful chord, when Obote fell out with Kabaka Frederick Mutesa, it was Idi Amin, then a colonel of the army that he turned to for survival. On May 24, 1966, Obote sent a force commanded by Idi Amin to attack the Liberai in order to bring the Kabaka alive or dead. Amin carried out this order diligently. While he obeyed his master's orders to the letter, Amin had his personal ambitions up his sleeve. For example, he was recruiting hundreds of his kinsmen into the army. These were to come in handy later when he decided to take over high office. Among these included Sudanese and Congolese. By the early 1970s, Amin had created a sizable force within the Uganda army that could answer to his whims and Obote recognized this too. A fallout started and finally, it culminated into the 1971 coup. At that time Obote wanted to arrest Idi Amin for various cases including murder. Then, Major General Amin however used his men to stop the move and was soon declared president while Obote was attending a Commonwealth conference in Singapore. There was jubilation when Amin captured power, largely because Obote had lost popularity. But soon, it was noticed that Amin was not the savior the country thought he was. Nonetheless, he started off by releasing all political prisoners who had been imprisoned by Obote. He appointed an all-inclusive cabinet, full of professionals and experts which were hailed by both local and international commentators. But underneath this all, there was murder going on, especially of Langi soldiers in the Uganda army. According to various accounts, over 1,000 soldiers from privates up to the rank of colonel were murdered in the first days after the coup. Outside the army, the first few years of Amin's regime saw the murder of several prominent personalities, including Ben Kiwanuka, Attorney General. By 1972, the economy which he had found in a good condition was shriveling. He had already caught up with religious extremism and had shifted from being a darling of the Western world, UK, to the East, especially Russia. He claimed to stand for the Palestinian cause and vowed to fight for it. However, it was his dream to chase away the Asians, who hitherto owned most key businesses that shook the world. He gave them just 90 days to leave or perish. Many of them left, others did not, but instead chose to commit suicide. Asian businesses were then distributed amongst his cohorts. He then embarked on building his army as one of the best in Africa at the time, with fighter planes MiGs from Russia, tanks among others. He was so smitten with his abilities that he threatened to fight the imperialists in South Africa and the Israelis from Palestine. In 1974, he got an international respite when he held the OAU conference in Kampala. Notable developments at the time included the construction of both Nile Hotel and Nile Mansions to host the conference. While killings continued unabated, Amin further took his antics to the international level. In 1976, he allowed a hijacked Air France plane, bound for Israel, to land at Entebbe airport. The Israelis, however, attacked and rescued their citizens a few days later. His claim on land at the border with Tanzania, and earlier claims of land at the border with Kenya continued. In 1978, Amin's soldiers launched an attack on the Kagera salient in Tanzania and captured it. Little known to Amin, this was the sign that the Tanzanians and various exile groups wanted to get rid of Amin. By late 1978, they attacked, and by April 1979, Amin had been defeated. Amin fled to Libya and later Saudi Arabia, where he died on August 16, 2003. Officially, Amin had 5 wives, all of whom he treated as first ladies at different functions. They included Kay Amin, Nora Amin, Medina Amin, Sarah Amin, and Malyamu Amin. The number of children he fathered is above 30. After more than 70 years under British rule, Uganda gained its independence on October 9, 1962, and Milton Obote became the nation's first prime minister. By 1964, Obote had forged an alliance with Amin, who helped expand the size and power of the Ugandan army. In February 1966, following accusations that the pair was responsible for smuggling gold and ivory from Congo that were subsequently traded for arms, Obote suspended the constitution and proclaimed himself executive president. Shortly thereafter, Obote sent Amin to dethrone King Mutsa II, also known as King Freddy, who ruled the powerful kingdom of Buganda in south-central Uganda. A few years and 2 failed but unidentified assassination attempts later, Obote began to question Amin's loyalty and ordered his arrest while en route to Singapore for a Commonwealth Heads of Government conference. During his absence, Amin took the offensive and staged a coup on January 25, 1971, seizing control of the government and forcing Obote into exile. Once in power, Amin began mass executions upon the Akoli and Lango, Christian tribes that had been loyal to Obote and therefore perceived as a threat. He also began terrorizing the general public through the various internal security forces he organized, such as the State Research Bureau, SRB, and Public Safety Unity, PSU, whose main purpose was to eliminate those who opposed his regime. In 1972, Amin expelled Uganda's Asian population, which numbered between 50,000 and 70,000, resulting in a collapse of the economy as manufacturing, agriculture, and commerce came to a screeching halt without the appropriate resources to support them. When the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP, hijacked an Air France flight from Israel to Paris on June 27, 1976. Idi Amin welcomed the terrorists and supplied them with troops and weapons, but was humiliated when Israeli commandos subsequently rescued the hostages in a surprise raid on the Entebbe airport. In the aftermath, Amin ordered the execution of several airport personnel, hundreds of Kenyans whom were believed to have conspired with Israel, and an elderly British hostage who had previously been escorted to a nearby hospital. Throughout his oppressive rule, Amin was estimated to have been responsible for the deaths of roughly 300,000 civilians. In October 1978, Amin ordered an attack on Tanzania. Aided by Ugandan nationalists, Tanzanian troops eventually overpowered the Ugandan army. As the Tanzanian-led forces neared Kampala, Uganda's capital, on April 11, 1979, Amin fled the country. He was succeeded as president by Yusufulul 2 days later. After escaping first to Libya, Amin finally settled in Saudi Arabia. Over time, the number of Amin's intimate allies dwindled and formerly loyal troops began to mutiny. When some fled across the border into Tanzania, Amin accused Tanzanian President Julius Nyerere of instigating the unrest and retaliated by annexing the Kagera salient, a strip of territory north of the Kagera River, in November 1978. 2 weeks later, Nyerere mobilized a counter-offensive to recapture the land, and drove the Ugandan army out with the help of Ugandan exiles. The battle raged into Uganda, and on April 11, 1979, Amin was forced to flee when Kampala was captured. Although he originally sought refuge in Libya, he later moved to Saudi Arabia, where he lived comfortably until his death of multiple organ failure in 2003. Thank you for watching this video.